Hi folks, it's Richard James the Socio again, conducting the JFK assassination of truth 2022. I'm standing here basically in the house of Rockefeller. I'm in the northwest corner of Rockefeller Center. I'm looking here, this is 6th Avenue. And I call it the corridor of lies and the Grand Canyon of lies and misinformation. This is where the Rockefellers broadcast all their disinformation and lies and hate and deception. And this is my little camera of truth here. This is Memorial Day in New York City. It's a beautiful day. This is going to be a 7-day tour of truth. We spend 4 days in the city, and then we go up to Pocantico with the Rockefeller Preserves, where the cabal rules the world. We'll expose the cabal too. But if people are familiar with my writing and my books and my tours, I believe JFK was assassinated by Nelson Rockefeller. And well, I got a billion words to speak, and it just doubled down and quadrupled down and the Rockefeller guilt. But I always start here at the Hilton Hotel. Oh yeah, I want to say one thing. If you notice, my voice has changed. That's because I was struck down with COVID. The Rockefellers unleashed COVID to destroy the Trump administration through their biological warfare general Gates, Bill Gates, and their quack scientist Fauci. The building was designed by Wally Harrison, one of Nelson Rockefeller's best friends. And I believe he was connected with the Kennedy assassination as well. Because when Nelson was the coordinator, Wally was the co-coordinator along with John Hay Whitney. But this is where the headquarters of the Clinton Foundation. Does this strike you odd that the Clintons would come all the way from the backwaters of Arkansas and be here in the Time Life building, owned by the Rockefellers? Well, as I said, went through Rockefeller. I'm going to talk more too about Hillary Clinton and her connection with the Rockefellers as we go up to Pocahontas. We're going to go to her home, Chappaqua. All you're going to see is a gate. I could tell you some stories. But this building was the residence for the Zapruder film. In 1963, you know, the story was Henry Luce bought the rights to the Zapruder film, and it traveled how many miles it down? 1,800 miles probably, and buried in their vaults. But they sold the stills. They never saw the video. The video really never came out until the House Assassination Committee dragged it out. So the public never saw. The videos tend to show that Kennedy was shot from the front, which defied the official version written by the Rockefellers, called the Warren Commission. Yeah. All right, now we're going to walk across the street here. All you can see right there, this is a nice little, I'm holding the camera here. This is, sorry if it jiggles a little bit. I don't really like to. All right, this is Standard Oil headquarters. Well, it was. 1971, it became Standard Oil headquarters. And you can see, I don't know if you can see that, it's the Chase Bank. It's a Rockefeller Bank. This is Standard Oil headquarters. Now, right here is Time Life. 1271 Avenue of the Americas. All right. Does it strike you odd that the Zapruder film would travel 1,800 miles and be hit across the street from the Rockefeller Standard Oil Corporation? Doesn't that strike you as odd? Yeah. Now this is Standard Oil headquarters here. Well, it was. They moved out. Guess where they moved to? Dallas, Texas. 1970. This was built in 1970. It says Exxon. Now, the Rockefellers changed the name of Standard Oil to Exxon. And now you're going to say 1970, but actually Standard Oil was headquartered at, before 1970, was headquartered at 75 Rockefeller Plaza, which is around the corner. And I'm just going to pan the camera here a little bit. A lot of sunlight here. This is a nice fountain the Rockefellers have. Kind of ducked back here in the shade. But across the street is NBC headquarters. See what I'm trying to tell you? All the news, the news that Donald Trump would call fake news, I call it bogus news and disinformation, all comes out of Rockefeller Center. There's NBC. Now, CBS, we were just down there. I kind of move the camera a little bit here so you can see, get a perspective. See? I'll show you CBS. I still can't get CBS here. I'm going to show it to you though. Here's Fox News. You see the ticker? That's Fox News. I'm going to tell you how Fox News is run and controlled by the Rockefellers and what Fox News is all about. You know something? Fox News, News Corp building. Oh, we got some shade here. Is almost entirely filled with NBC offices. See what I'm trying to tell you, folks? We'll talk more about Fox News. They do our 48th Street tour. Now this building here, it's a little, they're redoing the front. This is McGraw Hill, which is owned by the Rockefellers. Now there's a story that connects McGraw Hill to the Kennedy assassination, and it connects through, her name was Bancroft, Mary Bancroft, who was Alan Dulles' mistress, and she was best friends with Ruth Forbes Payne Young. She's an heiress to a fortune too. Well, she's related to John Kerry, John Forbes Kerry, the opium lord. And there's a huge, and this also connects back to the murder of James Reagan, because her family controlled the part owners of the communication oligarchy. Her grandfather was president of Bell Telephone. Now, okay, let me cut to the chase here again. She was the mother of Michael Paine, and Michael Paine provided a safe house for Oswald on the eve of the Kennedy assassination. And she lived up here on the upper side next to Nelson Rockefeller. I still haven't found an exact address, but it's somewhere in the neighborhood. I'm going to continue to research that. Okay, we got some nice shadow here. We'll take advantage of it. And here's NBC right there. This is actually the back door. Yeah, that's NBC headquarters. Yeah, Jimmy Fallon. Yeah, Jimmy Fallon. Right there. See? The Tonight Show, Jimmy Fallon. Yeah, come on, NBC. All right, now I'm going to show you how all media comes out of Rockefeller Center. That's how they, right there. That building right there. I should say all lies come out of Rockefeller Center. This is the national misinformation. Right there, that black building. I think they call it BlackRock or something. Something like that. Not to be confused with BlackRock Corporation. That's CBS. Okay, there's NBC. And now there's Fox where the ticker is. You see the ticker? Right there, you see the ticker moving? That's Fox. And ABC actually moved up to Columbus Circle, which was a development of John Rockefeller III. And ABC was just basically pretty much a knockoff from NBC. It was part of NBC. It was NBC Boo Channel, Boo Station. They turned it ABC because the Rockefellers came on with some kind of heat for they came on to a lot of heat for antitrust violations, so they just set up a dummy corporation called ABC. But ABC distinguishes itself in sports. I want to talk about one thing I always like to talk about when I come here. Why do the Rockefellers control our media? Yeah, I want to talk to you a little bit of why the Rockefellers can't control the media oligarchy, broadcast media, well, originally radio media. The answer to that question is very simple. what happened was your technologists like Tesla and Thomas Edison and the Rockefellers bankrolled the development of this technology, just like they bankrolled the development of Silicon Valley. And Tesla developed that technology, but it was actually Marconi. See, this building right here was, before it's the Comcast building now. For 50 years it was the GE building, but before that was the RCA building, which is what? Was a company owned by Marconi. See, Marconi utilized Tesla's technology to broadcast, to send radio waves. Well, that was a great tool to the maritime industry, because before radio, how did you communicate with ships out to sea? Well, you use, I don't know, carrier pigeons, smoke signals, foghorns. But with broadcast, with radio waves, who owns the biggest fleet of ships in the world? The Rockefellers. Their oil shipping, their freight shipping, on the Great Lakes, their iron ore shipping. It goes on and on and on. Now their partners in NBC is who? United Fruit Company, now Chiquita Brand Bananas, and they had a huge fleet of ships, obviously carrying fruit. See, so then they went from just, well, we expanded out, we turned it into a business. They turned it into radio. Okay, another thing I want to show you here, it ties to background on the Kennedy assassination. The back, Simon & Schuster. See, this is the disinformation. See, the Rockefeller reaches with different disinformation in so many ways. See, and they publish all our textbooks. They publish all our books. This is part of their book publishing oligarchy. Simon & Schuster published all the school books in this country to dumb down the children to think the Rockefellers became philanthropists. I put philanthropists in quotations. Forrest said the Rockefellers were philanthropists. The Rockefellers told you that. And you're going to believe it? See, and this is here is McGraw-Hill Publishing. And I'm sure they own a lot of other publishing. They own Garden City Publishing, which is Doubleday. But you know, publishing, I talk about publishing, school book publishing. Let's go to Dealey Plaza, 1963. Texas school book. Texas school books. Who published all the school books? Of course, it's all disinformation designed to socially engineer us and dumb us down to Rockefeller lies. Simon & Schuster. These Texas school book depository. School books. See, if you went into that bookstore, the Rockefellers left the calling card. You flipped over any of those book covers in 1963. If you flipped over, it would have said Rockefeller Center. But who would know that at the time? I was too young to hear the truth. It took me a long time. It took me 35 years of research to learn the truth. That's why it's hard for the average person, because the average person has been dumbed down by the Rockefeller social engineering and miseducational systems. This is why they can enslave us. This is actually 50 Rockefeller Plaza. This was originally built to be the headquarters for Associated Press and other press. There was other Associated Press and United Press International, UPI, all run out of this building by the Rockefellers, part of the disinformation network. And the reason I come here, because the Associated Press got mentioned in the Warren Commission documents. Uncle George G. Morinshaw's best friend, was associating, in his Warren Commission testimony, he mentioned the Associated Press. And he was associating with a man in Mexico. George was associating with a man in Mexico named Roderick MacArthur. Spelled just like the general, but no relation. But Roderick was an heir to one of America's greatest fortunes. You might have heard of the MacArthur John and Catherine MacArthur Foundation. And you know where it's run from? It's run out of Pocantico at the Cabal. There's about 20 big foundations that meet up there. And this is Nelson Rockefeller's backyard. And Nelson Rockefeller was well acquainted with John MacArthur. Roderick MacArthur. Now, this building, this address before was 33 West 50th Street. It got demolished post-war, like 1946. And the address was, Uncle George was working for a company making films, they were pro-Nazi films. I'm sure it was all part of Rockefeller disinformation schemes because the Rockefellers bankrolled, they were backing Adolf Hitler. We're going to talk a little bit more of that when we go up to the International Building. And they demolished the building to build Associated Press. And that in a lot of ways ties to the murder of James Reagan because a lot of these wire services were all interlinked. And see, America's corporations are completely and totally interlinked. You can't separate them. And the phone lines, the copper lines that this information runs on is controlled by who? The communication oligarchy, Bell Telephone, Western Union. All this stuff is commanded right down here on Manhattan. Now, some of those phones were run by so-called mobsters, but they didn't own that copper line, that network string that ran all across this country. No, that was owned by the WASP elite. And I mentioned the Forbes. They were not only opium dealers. Well, they made the money with the opium, and then they legitimized. They went into taking over the nation's communication oligarchy. See, the Forbes ran Bell Telephone. So I do like showing you this building here. It's a lot of history. Now, there's another building here I want to show you. Right here. That's right. Standing here in front of the International Building at Rockefeller Center. I'm using my monopod here. I'm a little safer here. But that's Atlas. You notice Atlas drops a knee. This guy drops that knee. He's genuflecting to St. Patrick. Right here. Capital of Christianity on American soil. You see there's a lot of people here. They're pretty much tourists. And, yeah, I'm not making that up. Yeah. He's genuflecting to St. Patrick. But you know something? Rockefellers took over the Catholic Church. Doesn't it strike you odd that the capital of Catholicism in America is right across the street from Rockefeller Center? Yeah, well, the Rockefellers took over the Catholic Church just before World War II through Pope Pius XII. Pope Pius XII was a house guest of Myron Taylor, who was president of United States Steel Corporation, which was founded by John Rockefeller. Of course, the Rockefellers will deny that. Rockefellers put all their shares in a proxy. So that's the sneakiness of the Rockefellers. But this is the International Building of Rockefeller. But you know, folks, this is really the capital of the Axis power and the birthplace of Adolf Hitler. Here's the story. The Rockefellers got screwed over by Joe Stalin. They had back Lenin, they had back Trotsky, and they were trying to get a hold of Russian oil. What's in the news today? Russian oil. The Rockefellers never give up. And there was a oil company named Bar Noble, which is primarily owned by the Nobel family. They sold out to Rockefeller. And Uncle George, Oswald's best friends, father and uncle were on the board of Bar Noble Oil Company, which was taken over by the Rockefellers. But after the Bolshevik Revolution, the Rockefellers lost all that. Stalin poisoned Lenin, if you want to believe that. I believe it. And then because the Rockefellers, Lenin was cutting deals with the Rockefellers. Well, you just had a revolution to end capitalism. Now you're toting trade with capitalists. So Lenin Stalin poisoned Lenin, and then Trotsky was moved to New Jersey and was a house guest of the Rockefellers in New Jersey. Then he moved to Mexico, where he was assassinated, multiple assassination attempts by him. But Stalin supposedly got him with put a pickaxe in his brain. Those agents. But this was the headquarters of the Axis power, because what you got the Italian building. I don't know which is which. One of these is the Italian building. One of these is the French building. You got it really close. Just take my word for it. And one of these is the British Empire building. But before Pearl Harbor, this was also what? The Japanese building, the Japanese consulate. They moved out after the bombing of Pearl Harbor. And then who moved in? The OSS. Run by, well, it's all run by the Rockefellers, but run by the father of the CIA, William Donovan. And this is the Spook Central. Well, might still be. This is where you would see Alan Dulles coming out, and probably Uncle George's brother. Dimitri worked for the OSS. Uncle George's brother worked for the OSS. We'll talk a little bit about him too. But like I say, you had the Italians, you had the Italian building, the French building, the Japanese, and the French, and the British. Well, the Italians were part of the Axis power. The Japanese were the Axis power. But also the Vichy French. See, it was the Vichy French who were part of the Axis power, southern France. And don't forget the British. There was a lot of pro-Nazi sentiment in Britain. After all, it was Neville Chamberlain, who was from a wealthy British business family that gave whatever to Adolf Hitler. And we all know that story. And then he got the Catholic Church. Of course, by the World War II, it had been taken over by the Rockefellers. And the Catholic Church was pretty much kneeling in reverence to Adolf Hitler. Why? Because Adolf Hitler, how did he begin his rise to power? As an anti-communist, an anti-Bolshevik. So that's why all these wealthy industrials, including Joseph Kennedy Sr., the Rockefellers, the Watson family of IBM, Charles Lindbergh, a lot of these people were decorated by the Fuhrer. And this originally was going to be the Third Reich building, but then with all the hostilities of the war, the Rockefellers, so let's forget that one. Yeah, this is Fifth Avenue. See, the Catholic Church worshipped the shrine of Adolf Hitler. You know why? Because Adolf Hitler, the Catholic Church took a lot of hits in Europe. I mean, they were fearful of the Bolshevik Revolution. Well, it took place in Spain, and the church lost Spain. But Franco was his name. He was a sergeant. He led a revolution to take back the country from the communists. And he was backed by who? Franco was backed by who? Adolf Hitler. There it is. Capital of Catholicism on American soil. Of course, now owned by the Rockefellers. As I said, the Rockefellers took over the Catholic Church in late 30s through Pope Pius XII, who was Myron Taylor's house guest. They built a room for their guests. It was a cathedral. It was up on the Gold Coast. And part of the Kennedy assassination involved the Catholic Church. You know, the Catholic Church was, 3 months before Rockefeller gave the final order to kill JFK, Nelson Rockefeller went to visit the Pope to get permission from the Pope to kill Kennedy. Actually, the Rockefellers didn't need the Pope, but they didn't want the Catholic Church. See, William Seward cut a deal with the Catholic Church. That's why I like to go down to Madison Park, tell you a story about William Seward. It goes back into the history of religion on American soil. I could speak a billion words. All ties into the Kennedy assassination. But this was a Protestant world here, going back to the Pilgrims. They came here because they hated Catholics. you had open religious warfare in Europe, so they came here for religious freedom, which meant religious freedom for Protestants. Well, we all know that story. Okay, so the rule in this country was Protestant, but what was going on was during the Civil War and leading up to the Underground Railroad, which was pretty much bossed by the, I mentioned their name, the Forbes, John Kerry Forbes, and William Seward. They were the pretty much, just like Black Lives Matter today, it's bankrolled by rich white people. And you got to understand, and the story's repeating itself as I speak with an open border. See, during the Civil War, the Underground Railroad, they were taking the labor force out of America. They were removing the labor force. Well, Seward had to be smart enough to know they needed to replace that labor. So what he did the unthinkable. And he opened the door. He opened Daytown with the Catholic Church to bring in Catholics, and he cut a deal with the Pope. He said, "These Catholics, in this country, the Protestants, the Astors, and these wealthy Protestants, they were shooting the Catholics down. They were shooting the Irish. They were lynching the Catholics. They were shooting Catholics. They were shooting the Irish right down here in Astor Place. They didn't want Catholics in the country. They didn't want them in because, after all, what was America about? It was about keeping out Catholics." But you know what happened? The wealthy elite Protestants, they knew the ones that owned the factories and the mines and the railroads, they had to surrender to this religious bigotry, and they had to have this labor force. So they brought all these Catholics in. They let them come in, and they could have their churches, they could have their priests, they could keep their native tongues. And once a year, they could parade down Fifth Avenue, like the Irish Day Parade. But they were not supposed to rise. See, this is where Skull and Bones came in the Kennedy assassination. The Catholics, that's why Skull and Bones was started, to slap down Catholics. The Catholics could not rise above ward boss, straw boss, line supervisor. Now all of a sudden, these Protestants wake up one day and they got a cocky Irishman in the White House. They were going to sleep with that. They were going to tolerate that. I told you about Robert Tenbrook Stevens. His grandfather led the Rockefellers at the Saratoga battlefield. 7 Rockefeller members fought at the Saratoga battle. They were the sons of the American Revolution. They didn't fight and die to bring Catholics in the country. But let me cut to the chase here. Seward opened the door for the Catholics. I mean, the story's going on today with the porous border. Remember, Trump tried to put up the fence, everybody come in. Rockefellers want a cheap labor force. They don't want to pay $15 an hour. They want to pay $2 an hour. All right. I could talk forever about religion and Kennedy assassination, how the Protestants and the Catholics came to blows. But I told you, Nelson Rockefeller went to visit the Pope 30 days, 3 months before he gave the final okay to kill Kennedy. He didn't need the Popes, but he did. I'll tell you why he went to see the Pope. He went to see the Pope to tell the Pope that, we're taking out one individual. I know he's the greatest Catholic ever. He's your greatest member, but we got to take him out. This is not a war on Catholicism. This is a war on one man. See, also what was happening in this country was the Catholic Church, despite all its problems in Europe, was making a fortune in America. This economic boom, the Catholics were going into the churches and Sunday throwing in their ka-ching in the collection baskets. Well, where did that money come from? It came from the jobs they had working for the Protestants in their banks, in their mines, in their railroads. I shouldn't say banks, but in their mines, in their auto factories, and their steel mills, and building their high-rise office buildings like Rockefeller Center. They were throwing in all this ka-ching, and nobody knew that better than L. Smith. And L. Smith joined with the Protestants to build Empire State Building. It's another story. It also connects to the Kennedy assassination. I don't know if I'm going to get into that now. But when it comes to religion and the Kennedy assassination, I can speak a billion words. I'm looking at this building here. This building I mentioned in the Warren Commission documents. Yeah, this is actually the southeast corner of Rockefeller Center. Official corner anyways. This is 48th Street. It's actually a Fifth Avenue address, but this is the door. See, if you see, you might not be able to read it because of the sunlight, but it says 600 Fifth Avenue. So Now, it got mentioned in the Warren Commission report because Uncle George DeMarinche is Oswald's best friend. I keep saying this, he was not an uncle to Oswald, he was an uncle in name of Jacqueline Kennedy. Yes, you heard me right, Jacqueline Kennedy. But he was Oswald's best friend. Said he was working for people connected with Sinclair Oil. Well, in 1963, this was Sinclair Oil headquarters. It was also the headquarters of Manufacturer Hanover Bank, which merged in with the Chase Bank. Well, the Chase Bank, Manufacturer Hanover Bank, and Bank of America, well, it's just Associated Press building. You know, I forgot to tell you, Associated Press is occupied by Bank of America. These are all banks controlled by the Rockefellers. Well, Bank of America, Chase Bank, and Manufacturer Hanover Bank were financing Uncle George's excursion into Mexico as a painter for Nelson Rockefeller, as an artist for Nelson Rockefeller. This is Nelson Rockefeller's good neighbor policy. When he was the coordinator, he was trying to build a cultural exchange. That was all up front. So he got mentioned. So who got mentioned? Sinclair Oil, owned by right here at Rockefeller Center, Chase Bank. Well, they have branches here, but their main office is down in the financial district. Bank of America, which took over Associated Press building. And Citibank, too, is another Rockefeller bank, but it never got mentioned, but they actually own this building here. Or they operate in there, right there. We're going to talk about that building and how it ties to the Kennedy assassination. Okay, so let me repeat. Sinclair Oil building, Sinclair Oil Corporation got mentioned in the Warren Commission, but Uncle George said, because I'm working for people connected with Sinclair Oil. This was their headquarters in Rockefeller. Doesn't that strike you as odd? Why does everything come back to Rockefeller Center? Or their Rockefeller banks and their oil companies and their railroads? Let's go down. We're going to go down here just a wee bit. I'll shut the camera off here for you. Yeah, this doorway right here, you can't read, nothing's legible. Maybe got real close. Yeah, here it is right here. Well, 15 West 48th Street, but actually that's a back entrance. But I think this entrance here, this building here, okay, this is the back entrance, this is 48th Street, but this is actually, I believe, what we call One Rockefeller Plaza. Because you can see there, see that's the street name there, Rockefeller Plaza. See that? Yeah. It goes by the address of One Rockefeller Plaza. See, there's a door here, right here, and there's a door here. All right. And this building here, I just talked to you about this building here. Let me back this lens off. See, that was the Sinclair Oil building. You see, you can see there, right there, there's an edge. All right. Then we come here to this building. This wall from 1963. And this is ties to the Kennedy assassination. I don't know if it really got mentioned in the Warren Commission report. It came out through the research of independent researchers. But this was the original Time Life building. Now remember, the Zapruder film was bought by Henry Lewis. By 1963, though, Time Life had moved to 6th Avenue because they had such tremendous success. They had to expand. So they moved out of here. And guess who moved in? General Dynamics. See, and General Dynamics, I believe General Dynamics financed the Kennedy assassination to the tune of $100,000 that was used to hire the assassins. And this is 48th Street. I'm telling you about the three men who connected the Kennedy assassination who worked right here on 48th Street. Doesn't that strike you odd? The three people that killed Kennedy were working at Rockefeller Center. What does that tell us? Is that coincidental? I don't think so. But I'm going to walk here. It's nicer if I walk here. This is the Eastern Airline building. And they still call it the Eastern Airline building. And for a while, it actually was run by Donald Trump. Then it became the shuttle or something, Eastern Airline shuttle. That was long after the Rockefellers gave them control of it. This is the headquarters of Eastern Airline. You know, you could probably see. I'm going to zoom in there a little bit. Maybe you can see. You see the mural on the wall there? Try to get up a little closer. Because we're in the shadows here. I don't want to go in there because people are getting real nervous. As Rockefellers, it's okay when they spy on us, but they don't want us putting cameras on them. Although it's, I'm always on my right. See the airplane? See the airplane? Right there. Eastern on the airplane. See it? That's actually a painting. It's a mural called the history of transportation. Very historic. Very historic. And David Fairley, remember Eastern Airlines there, David Fairley, who was indicted for assassinating President Kennedy, worked for Eastern Airlines. I'm sure he was in this building once or twice. See? And he was a Jesuit, you know. Talk about the Catholic Church and the role in the Kennedy assassination. The Jesuits are the elite assassins for the Vatican. Of course, remember now, the Rockefellers took over the Vatican. They took over the Catholic Church, see? And that must be at 1 Rockefeller Plaza. I just told you that. It's hard keeping these addresses. But I want to get this here. I think this is it, see? Yeah, I see 1 or 19. But this was the original. It's hard to see that. Can't even make that out, but there's some things that changed. See, but this was the original Time Life building. I just call it 1 Rockefeller Plaza. But then again, this is the Eastern Airline building. The Rockefellers got flags up. It's Memorial Day, so they haven't turned completely woke yet. But they're working on it. Wow. And this was Eastern. David Ferry. Have you ever saw the JFK movie? You know that funny little guy in the movie, Joe Pesci played? That's David Ferry. Now, I'll say this about the JFK movie. It's basically garbage. But only credit I'm going to give to the movies, it did spark a little interest and suspicions. But it's pretty much garbage. You know why, folks? What did it tell us? More confusion and mystery, that's what see, when you crowd confusion and mystery, that's what the Rockefellers want. So when you make garbage films like that, instead of going to the truth and make the garbage like that, just throws people off the trails, the true trail to the Rockefellers. This is the concourse of Rockefeller Plaza. This is where they skate in the wintertime. The golden statue that's real gold too. That's gold plated. 24 karat gold plated. This is called the concourse. This is where MLK was meeting with Nelson Rockefeller, and Nelson Rockefeller was giving MLK suitcases full of money. Let me tell you something, folks. You take from the Rockefellers, you do so under the penalty of death, because they expect something in return. See, I never really went a lot into the MLK assassination. I told you about Spillman Sisters Chapel and Spillman University. Laura Spillman was married to John D. Rockefeller. Yeah, you heard me. Laura Spillman was John D. Rockefeller's wife. There was 2 sisters. One was Laura. I'm not familiar. But they skate here in the wintertime. Alright. But I wanted to show you this. We're in the direct sunlight here. I'm not going to stay out here too long. You know, when you got a camera like this, people stare at you. They don't like the truth getting out, these Rockefellers. I don't know if you can even read it. So much sunlight. But it says, that's a Bible quote. Closest thing you're going to get to Christianity. It's probably too much light to even see, I don't know. But it says, wisdom and knowledge shall be the stability of thy times. That's from Isaiah. That's a Bible quote. That's called wisdom. Lori did that. Well, here's the tragedy. There is in the building, there was a famous, that front door, that's the front door of 3 Rockefeller Plaza, which is now the Comcast. That used to be the mural by Diego Rivera, the communist. They took it down. The Rockefeller shipped it to Mexico. Would you believe it? I mean, what more are we going to give to Mexico? We gave all our jobs to Mexico and China. The Rockefellers did. Now we're giving away our priceless artworks. But I don't want to give these Rockefellers credit. I don't want to give these Rockefellers criminal credit for anything, but you know, I hate to say it, I do like some of their artwork, even though it's not Christian in nature. See, and if you look over there, I'm just going to pan the camera. You probably can't even see it, but that's also by Lowry. That's the clock. You can see it. They call that the clock. That's the back of the backside of the International Building. Yeah. I'm back, folks. There it is, see, 10 Rockefeller Plaza, which is Eastern Airline Building. It's hard to read, so much light on it. I'm trying to find shade, and there's the aviation. The aviation. That's called a mural of the history of aviation. I forgot who the artist is. But this was the building. David Ferry, who was indicted by Jim Garrison for the assassination of President Kennedy, worked for Eastern Airlines. This was the Eastern Airline headquarters run by Lawrence Rockefeller. You know, his brother. Now this whole area was, the Rockefellers were building into an aviation trust because Pan American, see, was in the Sinclair Oil Building. Pan American started in the Sinclair Oil Building. And before that, of course, they built the Pan Am Building, which is now Metropolitan. Metropolitan Insurance. But David Ferry was found dead only hours after his release. And of course he was well associated with Clay Shaw. And Clay Shaw got mentioned. You know something, neither of these guys are mentioned in the Warren Commission. They would not let their names in. The Warren Commission would not have their names. But they were both, well, they were both associates of Oswald, although the Warren Commission never brought that out. That kind of came out later in the House Assassination Committee. We're going to take a little walk down here. And I want to find shade. I'm seeking shade. I'm seeking shade. I'm seeking shade. I'm seeking shade. We got it. I'm walking down 48th Street now, up at the side of the Eastern. Yeah, like I said, Pan Am was headquartered. It was started in the Sinclair Oil Building, which was also the manufacturer. Hang, it's a little jerky here, this camera, but I want to take this little walk because we're going to go down to Fox News. Fox News is 48th Street. I'll talk to you a little bit here. I've mentioned something to you about. Okay, I'm back. I'm still on 48th Street. This is our 48th Street tour because the Rockefellers they stabled their assassins on 48th Street. The reason the Rockefellers keep their assassins close is because they never know when they are forced to do damage control or clean up. But I'm standing here, this is still 48th Street. We're heading down to the old Vanderbilt Theater for a reason. But I'm standing here next to Fox News. This is still Rockefeller Center. All your news comes out of, here it is, Fox News, Democracy 2022. What a lie, folks. You see what I'm trying to tell you about Fox News? This is garbage news, folks. See, here's their little ticker here. Here's their little ticker. But this building is owned by the Rockefellers. This is all Rockefeller Center. But this used to be the Celanese Corporation. See, the Rockefellers own the world textile oligarchy. Why? Because most of our clothes are made from petroleum. See, all the Rockefeller oligarchies are right here within eyeshot. You got their broadcast oligarchies, you got their book publishing oligarchies, you got their fine art oligarchies. When you talk paintings worth $150 million, of course, those are prices inflated by the Rockefellers. You got their petroleum oligarchies. You got their aviation oligarchies. You also have their Steelmaking oligarchy. Yes, U.S. Steel was birthplace, not right here, but we're going to go up to the corner and Fifth Street, and this is actually next door where Nelson Rockefeller died. We're going to go up to his death place. That was the birthplace of U.S. Steel by the Rockefellers in the University Club. Exposed the Rockefeller crimes, like the Kennedy assassination, and they come after you. Now, one of these places will tell you that the truth. They'll go right along with the official lie that Oswald did it and did it alone, and Jack Ruby was upset over the death of his president. They're going to trumpet out that lie. See, they don't, it upsets them that they support Trump. He's, who I'm talking about. I'm talking about Hannity, and I'm talking about the other guy there, and I'm talking about the judge too, but the other guy there, I can't think of his name, but his father actually worked for the Rockefellers. I'm sorry, I can't think of his name, but you know what I'm talking about. It's prime time. They used to have their pictures on the wall here. They took them down and put up this lie. See, they're fading them out. They're fading them out. See, they're fading them. They're little by little, they're slated to go. See, Lou Dobbs, they got rid of first because he was preaching, he was exposing Rockefeller crimes. See, they control the whole sector. Here's the story. The only news outlet in this country that's profitable is Fox News. All the other outlets, CNN, MSNBC, ABC, CBS, and NBC are all losing money. Fox is the only one that makes money for the Rockefellers. So they can't cut Fox out. The only reason these liberal, Fox would call bogus media, stay in power is because of Fox is making the profit for they can't get rid of Fox when all the other ones are losing money. So they got little by little, they're going to transform Fox. They're going to turn him into an anti-Trump, little by little, mark my word, anti-MAGA. Okay. Anti-MAGA news media. This is what they're trying to do. Now, again, I'm going to repeat myself. I'm 48th Street. This is where Rockefeller, all the people indicted for the assassination of President Kennedy. I'm talking Oswald. Now, Oswald kept suing Uncle George, who worked for Sinclair Oil. And this is McGraw Hill over here. This is a huge, Rockefeller Center is huge. This is all Rockefeller Center. But this is the sleazeball side. This is the sleazeball side. We're going down here towards we're going to go down here towards the theater district. We're going to go to the Vanderbilt Theater. Well, what was the Vanderbilt Theater? Hi, folks. I'm still on 48th Street. This is a historic building. It's being preserved. This was built back in the 1800s. It's the Court Theater. This was all part of the theater district back when. I'm on 48th Street here. They're doing a beautiful reservation. The Rockefellers might have something to do with that too. I don't like to give these criminals too much credit. But I'm on 48th Street. This is where the Rockefellers warehouse their assassins. All three men indicted for the Kennedy assassination worked on 48th Street. Now, Oswald indirectly through Uncle George. Oswald indirectly through Uncle George. And moving my camera here a little bit. I found some shade here. These buildings just put up by the Rockefellers. This here, you can see it's under construction. It's quite a tall building. I'm not going to count how many floors. But it's not a good, I'm kind of close here. I wish I could get further back. But just listen to my voice here. This used to be the Vanderbilt. These are the air rights of the Vanderbilt Theater. It looks just like the Court Theater. It goes back to the 1800s. The Rockefellers demolished it back when and put up a parking garage. And then they redemolished. When I came in 2008 for a tour, they'd redemolished the parking garage. It was an empty lot. It's actually 148 48th Street. And we're right off 7th Avenue here, this theater district, 7th Avenue and Broadway down here. We're going to go down there and show you a little bit of the theater district, how it ties to the Rockefellers. And this was the Vanderbilt, air rights of the Vanderbilt Theater owned by the Rockefellers. Now, I talked about the three men indicted for the Kennedy assassination. Now, one of them was Clay Shaw. Clay Shaw physically worked there. He ran a group of actors in this theater, and he supervised a group of actors. It was like a little acting company. They worked out at this Vanderbilt Theater, which this goes back to the 1930s. And actually, at the time, NBC was using the theater to produce Broadway plays for radio broadcasts, and he was part of that. See, then again, it's another link to the Rockefellers. And then when we came back here to 2020, this building was up here. I know it's not a good view, it's not a good angle, but then again, I want you to connect it to the people who, the three men indicted for the JFK assassination, connect well to 48th Street. Now, I talked a little bit about David Fury and Eastern Airlines and Oliver Stone's movie JFK. David Fury was the bad guy, Joe Pesci played. You know, that's not a good movie. JFK movie is basically what makes my job harder. It's garbage theater. And you know, folks, what does it do? It doesn't solve the crime. It only makes it more confusing and more harder to solve. I mean, in a direct way, what Oliver Stone did in his great stupidity was help protect the Rockefellers. And this is what I have to overcome, all this misinformation, stupidity, and ignorance out there. But you gotta understand, most people's planet, with myself being one of the exceptions, they've been destroyed, their brains have been destroyed by the Rockefellers, intentionally so they can be slaves on the Rockefeller plantation. That's why they can't understand this stuff. But, and I was born stupid too, but I became smart. How I became smart was through the writings of Emanuel Josephson, the greatest thinker of the last half of the 20th century and Rockefeller muckraker. Now we're going to go to his home. He lived on 61st Street, right around the corner from Nelson Rockefeller, actually. Here it is. That's the way the Vanderbilt Theater looks. We're going to head down to Times Square. Hi, folks. Found a nice little niche here in the shade. I'm in Times Square, actually. This is the theater district. A lot of people around here. But this is Rockefeller Center is part of the cityscape here. Right there. You see that? Well, it looks like an American flag. Like I said, the Rockefellers haven't turned woke yet. But that's the Barclay Building. That's the Barclay Building. That's part of Rockefeller Center. Some huge history with the Rockefeller. It used to be the Lehman Brothers. Huge history there. And I just want to quickly talk about the history of Times Square and why. And this is why when I talk about the Kennedy assassination, you read my books and stuff, I talk so much about the Astors and the Vanderbilts and the Roosevelt, these old families. They were I call them the lords and patrons of the Hudson River Valley. This was their city. And all this land at one time was owned by them and their families, and especially the Astors and others in there, you know. So all America's greatest corporations are anchored on the land, air rights that these people own. And a lot of them are still controlled now by the Rockefellers through the Chase banks, through their banking enterprises and their foundation enterprises and stuff. And some of this land goes back 4 centuries. But this is part of Rockefeller Center, all the way to 7th Avenue in Times Square. This is where they dropped the ball. But just quick history of Times Square. This was all owned by the Astors. And the Astors, this was the American Horse Trading Company. New York City had a massive population of horses one time. Instead of seeing red cabs, you saw horse-drawn carriages and wagons. It's a big building too, that Barclay Building. Look at it. It's huge. Look at it. It used to be the Lehman Brothers. And that ties to who? Blackstone. Rockefeller Front Corporation. Peter G. Peterson. And Stephen Schwarzman. Schwarzman. Yeah, they all were connected with Lehman Brothers. Lehman Brothers was basically a private financial brokerage firm pretty much bought by the Rockefellers. Like you can see the Rockefeller Center. But getting back to the Astors here, all this land was owned by the Astors. It was the American Horse Trading Company. And then when they got rid of the horses and brought in internal combustion engines, they turned this into the theater district. Well, this is their city. These people travel to New York City, so they provide them with hotels, they provide them with theater, they provide them a lot of other services. This is where the gangsters came in. They provide them with prostitutes, They provided them with alcohol during Prohibition. They provided them with games of chance. They provided them all. And the gangsters were handling these products. They were running an emporium of vice. And the Assers and the Vanderbilts and the Rockefellers were all profiting from it, but they won't ever admit that. As I say, this was all the American Horse Trading Company. So when they got rid of the horses and brought in the cabs, they converted this into a theater district and hotel district. And the Astors, they call it Times Square because of the New York Times newspaper. The New York Times newspaper operated where they dropped the ball. Right there. You can see the streamers there. That's the New York Times building. Well, it was. But then the New York Times outgrew that. But the New York Times was run by the Rockefellers. See, what happened was the New York Times was founded by a man named Edmund Morgan. Edmund Morgan. Morgan was his name. He was the founder of the New York Times as we know it today. He actually comes from central upstate New York, Aurora, New York. That was his home base up there. That's where he began the rise of his fortune. But Ed Morgan, he married an Astor. They married in with the Astor family. See, the Morgans and the Astors married in. So that's why the New York Times came here. But then the New York Times left, but always kept the name Times Square. I thought I'd tell you that little story, but the New York Times was run by the Rockefellers because Arthur O. Schulberger Sr. and Arthur O. Schulberger Jr. both had seats on the Rockefeller Foundation, which that's really the heart of the cabal, the Rockefeller Foundation. And that's why when people say, like Emmanuel Josephson always used to say, the Rockefellers run the New York Times as part of their print oligarchy. They also control the Washington Post. But I'm going to go more into that story later about Washington Post and how the Rockefellers control the Washington Post. Well, I mentioned the murder of the shooting death of Phil Graham, who was managing editor of the Washington Post. Well, he married the owner's daughter. So I'm going to go down here on 47th Street, and then I'm going to circle back around. And I always like to come to 47th Street. Technically, it's not part of Rockefeller Center, but it's the Gold and Diamond District. See, everything, money, doesn't it strike you odd that the Diamond District would be adjacent to the Rockefeller Center? Hi, folks. I'm standing in this is Times Square, and I'm going to take a walk down this is 47th Street. You see we got a police presence here, and for good reasons. This is the Diamond District and Gold District. And we're going to take a walk down there. Well, last year at this time there was a lot of violent altercations, let's put it that way. And it had to do with the trouble in Israel. A lot of Jewish presence down here. So last year there was, if you saw my video from last year, there was huge police presence. I guess they can't give up the vigil. But you're wondering why the Gold and Diamond District is adjacent to Rockefeller Center. And I'll tell you why. David Rockefeller is the king, the unofficial king of Africa. See, John Rockefeller II, he divided up the planet, and he gave Africa to David Rockefeller to run, and he gave Latin America to Nelson Rockefeller, boss, and he gave all of Asia to John Rockefeller III. In fact, we're going to go up to the Asian Society, started by John Rockefeller and Mrs. Zaruda film, Henry Luce. They're very close. You know, I also mentioned Edmund Morgan. Edmund Morgan and John Rockefeller III's name are, they were partners. And Wallace, who ran the Reader's Digest, they were all partners with John Rockefeller III. And their all names are right together on the wall of New York City Library, which is the Stephen Schwarzman building, which I mentioned Stephen Schwarzman as one of the bosses of Lehman Brothers, now Barclay. So we're going into the Diamond District. I like making this walk. And as we walk, we'll chat a little bit. I'm sorry the camera's getting a little bouncy here. You know, I'm not a Hollywood film crew here. So, but I got to get the truth out. Like I said, I'm doing this tour for God because I was struck down by Rockefeller released COVID when the Rockefellers released COVID to destroy the Trump administration through their biological warfare general Bill Gates and their quack doctor / scientist Fauci and liar. Now I got a dog in this fight, so you can see my voice has changed. But I got out of almost a deathbed for COVID, so I believe that's divine providence. God wants, the Almighty wants to keep the truth flowing. So I'm keeping my vow to the world to bring you the truth. So here it is. We're coming into the Diamond District. See, the lights are already going, flashing. Yeah, they had a lot of trouble here last year. There was some, I just say, violent street altercations. So they keep maintaining a police presence. If this street ever fell to smash and grab, whew, the whole nation economy would implode. But then again, I said, John Rockefeller II gave David Rockefeller Africa, where all our diamonds and gold come from. He gave Nelson Latin America, and he gave John Rockefeller III Asia. He divided up the globe. See, that's why it's so close. That's why the Rockefellers put the gold diamond district right next door to it. They can keep close tabs, you know. Coming up across the 6th Avenue here. They say one block south of Rockefeller Center. The sunlight is not good. The sunlight is not good. See, a lot of police presence around here because they're not going to tolerate smash and grab here. I'm a little nervous with this camera. This is an expensive piece of equipment. See the diamonds, baby? See the diamonds? Excuse me, girls. You want a diamond for Christmas? Send your boyfriends down here, or husbands, or whatever. Diamonds, diamonds, diamonds. Diamonds, diamonds, diamonds. No shortage of diamonds. No, sir. No, I do news videos.
Like what?
A lot about the Rockefellers, and there was a lot of trouble here last year, right? Yeah, come on. I came down there.
There's always trouble. There's a jewelry district. There's always something. That wasn't anything major. Nothing major.
All right. All right. Well, don't we have 50 policemen down here?
You always have policemen. We don't need policemen. We got cameras here.
Well, they kind of allow, you know.
They catch you with no problem. With no fucking problem with this. You might run away for a day or two. Believe me, you trapped on it.
Yeah. Well, I'm trying to maintain my freedom.
Yeah. Stay out of trouble.
Nice chatting with you. But I have to edit some of that out. I try to keep this friendly, family friendly. I don't like the sunlight. I should go to the other side. I don't like sunlight, folks. It's the enemy of photography. Whew. I tell you, you see what the Patriots did? I am carrying a load here. Cameras, batteries, tripods. You know, but you know, think of what the Patriots did, fighting for our freedom. This is Memorial Day. They didn't fight for the Rockefellers to steal all our freedom, steal our democracy, steal our Bill of Rights, steal our money, call it taxation, destroy the Fifth Amendment. Now, according to the Fifth Amendment, I don't have to tell the government anything. I don't have to tell the government how much money I make. The Rockefellers destroyed all that, or they shredded all that. 1913, when they set up the Federal Reserve Bank, Nelson Rockefeller's grandfather wrote the Income Tax Act in 1913, and they taxed everybody in the country but the who? The Rockefeller Foundation. See how these criminals operate, folks? This is a Memorial Day here. I don't think there's so much activity around. I guess people take a vacation buying diamonds on Memorial Day. See, there is police here. You see what I'm trying to tell you, folks? The other guy was, well, they want to talk. See, they want to talk. They don't want to talk negative because they don't want to scare people away. And that's the truth. Look at all those diamonds. Look at all those gems. You think I'm playing you, folks? You think I'm playing you? See? NYPD. NYPD. You know, there's still a little freedom. I'm going to talk a little bit about the internet. The Trump 2016 victory for democracy. Sorry, I tripped there. I'm looking up, not looking down. Here's a little doggy for my camera. Hey, little Poochie. And yeah, where was it? Oh yeah, the first democratic election in America. Trump introduced democracy, gave the freedom back to the people, and the people liked it. People enjoyed their freedom, but the Rockefellers aren't going to tolerate freedom. Because if the people have any right to vote, if there's any accountability, you see what I'm telling you, folks? There's police cars all over here. Believe me, they're everywhere. And when we were here last year, there must have been 50 of them down here. Yeah, well, like I say, if they do smash and grab, if woke unleashes smash and grab down here, this ain't play. This ain't play money, folks. See what I tell you? See what I tell you? The guy was saying, "Oh no." Well, yeah, see their business thing. You know, I understand. They don't want negativism going out there. Keep people away. See, I'm not playing you. I'm not playing you. Coming up to 5th Avenue now. That was it. That's a little tour of the Diamond District. Remember, David Rockefeller is the king of Africa, de facto boss. And that's where all the diamonds and gold come from. At least in profitable quantities. Also, big iron ore deposits in Africa. And oil. Yeah, the Rockefellers don't want to give up Africa. See, they don't care about America anymore. That's why they closed up the Rust Belt. You know, there's no boarded up buildings on 5th Avenue, folks. But you go out to the heartland, the Rockefellers outsourced all the jobs to Mexico and China. See, that's why they back Trump. Those are the people who back Trump, the people in the heartland. You know, Trump Tower's right up the street on 5th Avenue. Trump's, you know, he's no stranger to 5th Avenue. And yet, who voted for him? Not 5th Avenue, the heartland. Because they know they've been pretty much ripped off by the Rockefellers. Their jobs are outsourced. All their money was taken for higher taxes. Yeah, there's all kinds of prosperity here. This is the richest shopping way in the world. Yeah. Rockefeller Center. See, they take the money from the heartland and bring it to Rockefeller Center. That's how these criminals operate. All right, now this building here, this corner here, C. Douglas Dillon, as I said, C. Douglas Dillon was, well, hard to pick out. There's just so much sunlight here, but okay, there you see those barricades there. That street corner got mentioned in the Warren Commission documents. All right, and they were part of some company that Uncle George worked for that sold real estate down in South America. Well, that would tie in with Nelson Rockefeller's Pan America, Goodwill, cultural exchange thing. That would tie in well. I don't know if that's the original building or what. Also in these blocks here, it probably was, right in this block here was the telephone company, New York City telephone company operated out of here. See, Vincent Astor was on the board of Western Union. They were on the board of the communication oligarchy. The assassination of President Kennedy ties well to the nation's communication oligarchy, the phone companies, Western Union. See, that was really the birth of the NSA, National Security Agency. They listen in on our phone conversations and our text messages and our telegrams and everything. See, Vincent Astor and Percy Rockefeller were on the board of Western Union. See, I mentioned Clay Shaw. Clay Shaw worked for Western Union here, right here in this area of Rockefeller Center. He was assigned. He was an aspiring executive, along with other hats. He was an aspiring executive with Western Union. And, you know, was the Astor, you know, Roosevelt Astor Spiring. They were listening on telegrams. They're eavesdropping on people's telegrams. And that evolved in what is, I believe, today, the National Security Administration. They listen on everything we do. And like I said, the phone company was right in here one time. But then again, things have changed since 1963 and before that. But see, the Astor is probably most of this block because on the other side of the block was the Astor Hotel, run by Vincent Astor. Now I'm going to take a little walk down this street. All right, folks, I'm standing outside here in the Hotel Elysee. Oswald's best friend, Uncle George DeMarinci, got married here. He married into old money. Yeah, he married a girl named Dorothy Pearson. There was a short marriage. They did manage to produce a daughter, Alexa, who might still be Alexandria, named after George's mother. They were Russian heritage. And if you look straight ahead, then again, you can see the University Club. Well, it's hard to see. I'm over a little too far here, but yeah, you can see the university right there. That's the university right in the center of the screen. That's Fifth Avenue. And Nelson Rockefeller lived 2 doors away. Doesn't it strike you odd that all these people connected to Kennedy assassination lived next to Nelson Rockefeller and got married next to Rockefeller? But this is a real high-class hotel here. You got enough money to stay here. And like I say, she married Dorothy Pearson, who was for money. Old Protestant money. And they actually had a home in Locust Valley. Now, Locust Valley got mentioned in Warren Commission documents. That's kind of was the summering. That's where the Vanderbilts and Astors and Roosevelts had summer homes. It was the Gold Coast. It was up on Long Island Sound. And then they had the home in Florida. That's where Uncle George was shot to death, in their home in Florida. Well, see, Dorothy Pearson was married a few times. Dorothy Pearson's mother. And at the time, they had this is where she lived. The wedding ceremony was held in this hotel. They lived there in this hotel. At the time, I'll say George's mother-in-law was married to an Italian count. They were for money and beauty and everything. But she was not a Pearson by birth, and I think she was related to the Clarks. But the Pearson family, they had a store over here was demolished, the Pearson clothing store, and they sold tuxedos and high-priced suits to very wealthy people, which I'm sure included the Rockefellers. It was demolished as part of the Rockefeller Center expansion. And there's also Pearson Street around here somewhere. I encountered one day when I was out here videoing. But she was a Clark. She was related to. She's possibly related. I'm talking about Dorothy Pearson's mother, old money. They had a home in Locust Valley where the Astors and Vanderbilts. And Locust Valley got mentioned in the Warren Commission documents because Uncle George was living there with this guy named Hepburn, who was a very wealthy, owned a big mansion up there. George was living in the coach house. And Hepburn, that should ring a bell if you know anything about the Rockefeller histories of Standard Oil. The Hepburn Committee, yeah, they're probably related. I did a little research on that. See, these are old wealthy families that went back in the history of this country. They were senators and congressmen, and Hepburn was a New York State legislator. But a lot of those people were from big old money because they were protecting their business interests. And I also mentioned right here to the right, okay, this is still 54th Street. Oh boy, Dillon Reed. All right, and now C. Douglas Dillon was Kennedy's Secretary of Treasury. C. Douglas Dillon was very close to John Rockefeller III. It was C. Douglas Dillon and John Rockefeller III who set up the Peterson Commission, which was kind of like a whitewash of 509c3 foundation, the use of 501c3 foundation money. See, Nelson Rockefeller exposed the family. He exposed them. These people are criminals. They were thieves. They were murderers. And when Nelson Rockefeller went out there on the public stage, especially when he was vice president, he dangerously exposed the Rockefeller family. And that was the big fight between John Rockefeller III and Nelson, was that Nelson, being in politics, their father, John, never wanted his sons to be in politics. They didn't want that for his sons. Okay, when Nelson got elected, and I'll put elected in quotes, when Nelson got elected, I'm sure his father was somewhat proud. I'm sure. All right, this building here is 115. East 54th Street. This might be 105. I'm not sure. They're beautiful buildings. The townhouses. Yeah, 105 might be right here, although it wasn't not in the building, or it was demolished. But in the Warren Commission, it said 105 or 115. Well, that's 115. See? 115, right out of the Warren Commission documents. Now, who's Uncle George? Well, Uncle George was Oswald's best friend. And he was not an uncle to Uncle George. He was an uncle to Jacqueline Kennedy in name. She was named by Jacqueline Kennedy. You're probably thinking, what the heck? Yeah, but see, how does this fit in? It fits in because of the Rockefeller. This was the world of wealth, money, and power, and these people were partnered in the boardrooms. They were basically living in these neighborhoods. They were neighbors, and they basically fell in love and got married in many cases, or maybe fell in love with money and got married. It's probably 105 right there. They're beautiful townhouses. This is where Uncle George lived here. This was the address given when he married Dorothy Pearson. It was I'm talking Warren Commission documents, 105 or 115. They were never really clear. This is some kind of Hong Kong offices now. None of these are private residents anymore. Back in the day, you had to be pretty well off to afford places like this. Now, I'm going to walk the camera here. I know I'm going to shake it a little bit, but I want you to bear with me. Okay, now I just showed you these two buildings here. One is 115, 105. This is where these addresses came out of the Warren Commission report. This is where Uncle George was married with Dorothy Pearson, and Dorothy Pearson's mother lived at the Alizé Hotel down the street here. All right, can't see because there's construction work. And Nelson Rockefeller lived, well, just past the other side of Fifth Avenue. See how close they are together? I was telling you that Dorothy Pearson is related to the Rockefellers. Yeah, this is what I'm trying to tell you. These people, old wealthy people, the Rockefellers were the center system of this wealth and money here in Manhattan. That's why they're so close to the Rockefellers. See, Dorothy Pearson, I believe she was a clerk. And Nelson Rockefeller married a clerk. They're from Pennsylvania Main Line, which is Philadelphia Main Line, which is old Philadelphia money. Very snobbish money. See, Nelson Rockefeller married Todd Hunter Clark. Her family traced back to, the original. Her family members, her ancestors were grantees of King George. Rockefellers, they marry for love, but believe me, there's got to be some money involved. Got to be some money involved. So she was a clerk, and her grandfather was president of the Pennsylvania Railroad, along with many other things. And so Uncle George and Dorothy Pearson met at the Everglades Club in Palm Beach. See, they owned a home in Palm Beach. Well, Dorothy Pearson's family did. And George lived there. And they met at the Everglades Club in Palm Beach, which was a very privileged club, but it was noted for not allowing blacks in or Jews in. Now maybe that's changed since when? When they met back in, they were married back in the 40s, so things have changed. But one of his leading members was who? Well, a lot of wealthy, famous people. It was Joseph Kennedy Sr. was a member. And he resigned his membership when his son ran for president because of that bigotry, ethnic bigotry connected with the Kennedy name. So he gave up his membership there. Well, that's where George and Dorothy met. And George died in their home. I think the name was Clark. They owned a home in Palm Beach. Of course, Palm Beach was built up by who? Henry Flagler, John Rockefeller's closest business partner. Go on and on and on about that. I could speak a billion words, but I'm going to rotate the camera a little bit here, and I'm going to show you this building over here. Yeah, see that building right there? I don't want to jiggle the camera too much. But that building got mentioned at 370 Park. I'm going to try to move you closer, little folks, without jiggling too much. Sometimes the truth is a little painful. Sometimes you got to put up with a few things you want the truth. You can listen to lies all day because most lies are predicated on corporate profit. So they make it more pleasant. They make the lies more pleasant to you. This is how close it is to George. This is how close this building is to Uncle George's address in the Alizé Hotel in Nelson Rockefeller. And Nelson Rockefeller's pad at 13 West 54th, where Rockefeller died. This is how close. This is it. This is the one of the most. This is the most prestigious club in Manhattan, probably in the world. Now there's Citibank. See, Rockefeller Bank. But there's the building. Okay, 370 Park. I'm gonna stay here in the shade. All right, I'm gonna stay here in the shade. Too hot to go out on the island. I'll back up a little more here. Now I want to keep this camera focused because I want to show you how close these buildings are. There it is. That's the most prestigious club in Manhattan. There it is right there. Now you see that tall building in the background? I don't know what it is. May or may connect to the Rockefellers. But that little building owns those air rights to that big building. This is lucky this building survives. It was, then again, it was designed by McKim Mead White. And White had been trained architect Wallace Harrison, who I believe connects to the Kennedy assassination in many ways. He was very close to Nelson Rockefeller. And this is known as a sports club. It was actually built by who? Ogden Mills and William Payne Whitney. You know, two richest New Yorkers and real old money, Whitney money, and Ogden Mills. I told you, it goes back to the Schuyler's and the Livingstons and the Hamiltons and James Forstall married an Ogden. He married into the Ogden Mills fortune. They were very old when he was an Irish immigrant. I mean, his parents were. And he studied to be a journalist. Then he rose up to the top, one of the top executives with Dillon Reed. But see, Dillon Reed was selling stock for what? Caltech, which was Standard Oil of California, owned by the Rockefellers in Texaco. And it was the forerunner to Aramco. There's a million, I could speak a billion words. And I think what James Forster was doing, and his success was huge, tapping into the Ogden fortune through his wife and her social circles, and was selling him a lot of shares in Caltech, which is the forerunner of Aramco. Caltech became Aramco. Yeah, so much history. I could speak a billion words, but this was a primarily a health club, but it's the most prestigious club in Manhattan, without a doubt. And was built by Ogden Mills and William Payne Whitney, who was the father of John Hay Whitney, who was one of Nelson Rockefeller's best pals, and a man I connected to the Kennedy assassination. And he got called out. Well, the Waldorf Astoria right down the street. If it wasn't, the camera light is just too strong here. It's going to be tough going out there. But the Waldorf Astoria is right here. He made a secret society speech at the Waldorf Astoria. He called out Jack Whitney, whose father built this club. He didn't mention the name. He mentioned the Herald Tribune. That was Kennedy's secret society speech. Now, John A. Whitney, they call him Jack Whitney. He was not a member of Skull and Bones. He was a member of He was a Yaley, but a member of Scroll and Key, which was more secret than Skull and Bones. His most famous member was Dean Acheson. And Dean Acheson's daughter married William Bundy. You know, Nelson Rockefeller went for his confirmation hearing before the United States Congress, and they appointed him. He was appointed. He was not elected. He was appointed vice president, as Gerald Ford was appointed too. He said, "I'm going to put all my money in a blind trust." Well, the Rockefeller conflict of interest to Rockefeller would be over the top. You couldn't even measure it. So he said, "Well, I'll put all my money in a blind trust." Guess who was the trustee of the blind trust? William Bundy, Dean Acheson's son-in-law, Scroll and Key member, along with Jack Whitney. See how it all just goes full circle. But here was the thing. This kind of lit a lot. This building here, this address got mentioned in the Warren Commission documents, tied to Uncle George. It was tied to Uncle George. Well, it was a postcard that came out of here, signed by Uncle George with the letterhead 370. This is what they call the Racket and Tennis Club. I just call it 370 Park. And it was signed by Uncle George. So it lit conspiracy theories because Alan Dulles and John McCloy played tennis here and racket here. I'm sure Nelson Rockefeller played. And we can only assume George did because he was quite an athlete. He was even on the Olympic team for Poland, I think, but never competed in the Olympics. And then he played a lot of tennis. He played tennis with the Bouviers. That's talking about Jackie Kennedy, playing tennis with the Bouviers. We're going to talk more about that. We're going to go back to 740 Park. There's a lot of sun here, though. A lot of sun here. The sun is the enemy of photography. But you know, also, if you look closely, you can see. Can you see CHA? That's Chase Bank, folks. Doesn't that strike you as odd? Here's a connection to Warren Commission documents. Oswald's best friend, and here's the Chase Bank right in the same building. Well, that's just a branch bank. That's not their main bank. Isn't that funny? Doesn't it strike you as odd? See if we can see the S. CDS. Not important. Yeah, you can just make out the S in a little bit, but you know, I should probably do a lot of this tomorrow because this is NFL headquarters right here. Does it strike you odd? NFL headquarters right here. See, now that's Citibank. That's owned by the Rockefellers. See, William Rockefeller owned Citibank and John Rockefeller owned the Chase Bank. And at the time of the Kennedy assassination, Chase Bank got mentioned in the Warren Commission. And actually, you see that red banner there? Okay, that's Bank of America. See, Bank of America got mentioned in the Warren Commission report. Chase Bank got mentioned in the Warren Commission report. Nelson Rockefeller got, not the report, commission documents, got mentioned in commission. You know, and I think in Nelson Rockefeller's name got mentioned twice in Warren Commission documents. Not once, twice. In connection with Uncle George, twice. I'm not exaggerating, folks. I mean, these are published documents. Now, going back to the Waldorf Astoria, which is right, now, let's say the sunlight is killing us. Well, it's right there it is, see? That's the side of it. See, here's NFL headquarters. But you know who's in NFL headquarters? You know who occupies NFL headquarters? Blackstone. Peter G. Peterson. Also BlackRock. BlackRock is owned by Blackstone. And Blackstone is basically a front company for the Rockefellers. And Peter G. Peterson ties back to who? John Rockefeller III and C. Douglas Dillon of Dillon Reed. Douglas Dillon was Secretary of Treasury for JFK. And Nelson Rockefeller got caught taking money out of the Rockefeller Foundation to run his political campaigns, and the Kennedys were investigating, we're going to prosecute, we're in the process of prosecuting Nelson Rockefeller, probably for election fraud. And that's one of the reasons why Nelson Rockefeller gave the order to kill JFK. And I said before, Nelson Rockefeller announced his candidacy for the white presidency November 9th of 1963, 13 days before President Kennedy was assassinated. I would like to travel out there a little more. I want to talk a little more about this. Sunlight is brutal. It's a beautiful day, but not for photography. But we're looking at the side of the Waldorf Astoria. Maybe I can find some sunlight. Maybe I'll go across the street, see if I can get some shade. Hi folks, I'm back again. I'm looking at the Waldorf Astoria. I got a little better view of the Waldorf Astoria now. I don't know if the Waldorf Astoria got mentioned in Warren Commission documents, but this was the site of President Kennedy's famous secret society speech back in 1962, whenever it was. And he called out, who did he call out? He called out John Hay Whitney indirectly. He called out the Herald Tribune newspaper as his concept of a secret society, but it was indirectly a slap at John Hay Whitney. John Hay Whitney was not Skull and Bones. John Hay Whitney was part of Scroll and Key, which was a splinter group from Skull and Bones. And I told you the story. The most famous Scroll and Key was Dean Acheson, whose son, William Bundy, his son-in-law, and Nelson Rockefeller went before his confirmation hearings in Washington. They waved him right through. Nelson Rockefeller said he was going to put his trust money, obviously with the Rockefellers you got conflict of interest over the top. He said, I'm going to put all my holdings in a blind trust, and he appointed who? William Bundy to be the trustee of his blind trust. Yeah, that's a joke. That's a joke. It's not a joke, it's true, but it's how laughable, these people in Congress are to buy that line. And his brother, Mick Bundy, was National Security Advisor for President Kennedy. The Bundys were part of the Rockefeller conspiracy. I could talk forever on that. But there was a building in here, I don't know if it was demolished. Well, I'm going to rotate the camera here, and if you see here, you can see the see that Chase Bank. That's 370 Park. That's the Racquet and Tennis Club. That's connects to Uncle George. It's in the Warren Commission documents. That's 370 Park, the Chase Bank. That's just a branch outlet there. Does that strike you as odd that the Chase Bank is right in there and a building is in the Warren Commission documents? All right. And this is NFL headquarters. Now I'm going to tell you a little story about NFL headquarters. Also, it's also, a lot of people go by that don't know that. But it also is the headquarters for Blackstone and BlackRock. Yeah, 345 Park, it's NFL headquarters. But the NFL headquarters, the NFL goes back to what? The Rockefeller broadcast media oligarchy, you know, the football games and the sponsorships, the corporate sponsorships. It all fits in. But Peter G. Peterson operates out of this. And Peter G. Peterson worked for who at one time? Henry Kissinger and Associates. And I believe they work out of this office too. Kissinger Associates, which originally Kissinger Associates ran out of 22nd West 55th Street, which was, that was really where Kissinger Associates was. That was Nelson Rockefeller's, I used to call that the unofficial, when he was governor of New York State, that was his private office there. Rockefeller was on the first floor, Kissinger Associates was on the second floor. Now there was a building in here, the Ritz-Carlton. It's probably got built over, built around, built on top. I don't think that was it. That looks like some Orthodox church. It's famous. I gotta apologize, I don't know the name of it, but the Ritz-Carlton did get mentioned in the Warren Commission documents because Uncle George, I mentioned he was making movies, pro-Nazi movies. You know, they were propaganda films. I'm sure they were bankrolled by the Rockefellers because Adolf Hitler was a Rockefeller hand puppet. And it was in here somewhere. Either built over, built around. And Ritz-Carlton got mentioned in connection with Uncle George. Now you talk about the mafia and all this. This is just talk about the mafia, folks. This is something I'd like to do. You know, the Italians get a bad rap on this stuff, all right? But Murder Incorporated operated out of the Waldorf Astoria. All right, you know, Bugsy Siegel, Albert Anastasia, Meyer Lansky, Frank Costello. Now, Bobby Kennedy mentioned Frank Costello in published documents. I think it was in The Enemy Within. See, this is Murder Incorporated, folks. These are contract killers. But you see, who owned the building? The Protestants. The Astors. The Waldorf Astoria was built by the Astor family. So they were the landlords to the alleged mob. See, so who's giving the orders and who are these killers killing for? The Protestant rule, the Protestant mafia. Goes back to the murder of James Reagan. And also, if you look straight ahead, see that building with the fancy crown? That's MetLife in the background, am I right there? See that beautiful building? That's Penn Central. I mean, sorry, it's New York Central. Well, it became Penn Central. It was Penn Central for a while. Originally it was the New York Central, owned by the Vanderbilts. See, Anderson Cooper is a Vanderbilt. I can show you where his great-grandfather lived. And it's opposite the corner. It's on the opposite corner from Hooker and DeMorenschid's, their headquarters. That wasn't much of a headquarters. It was a beautiful building, but they didn't have much of a business. Must have been a front of Cold War activities ruled by the Rockefellers. But this building here was Maranzano. This was his office. See, and Maranzano was murdered in that building. He was the capo di tutti capi, the boss of boss. He's the one who established the 5 families. And the allegations were Murder Incorporated came out of the Waldorf Astoria, walked across the street and went up there and killed him. They dressed up like federal agents. tax agents. See, I'm thinking that during Prohibition, the New York, now I don't know if you noticed, but Park Avenue is the roof of the New York Central Railroad. The New York Central Railroad runs under the street. The trains, well, not anymore. New York Central, the commuter trains now. Actually, it was Jacqueline Kennedy. They were going to demolish this gorgeous building. Actually, Jacqueline Kennedy helped save it. The Vanderbilts have a health club in there. The Vanderbilt Health Club, tennis club or something. I don't know too much about it. But then again, Maranzano was paying his rent to who? The Vanderbilts. See, this is what I'm thinking. That the New York Central, this is what these gangsters were doing. They were running an emporium, alcohol, especially during Prohibition, gambling, drugs, prostitution, and who's profiting from it? The Astors, the Vanderbilts, the Rockefellers. They don't tell you the whole story. They just leave. The Italians were, let me run that by you again. See, this is the roof of the New York Central Railroad, right? Okay, I'm thinking that during Prohibition, they were selling alcohol on trains like they do today. See, and these gangsters like Murder Incorporated and Frank Costello and Meyer Lansky and Albert Anesthesia and Maranzano, the boss of bosses, were bringing in these contraband into these hotels and to the New York Central Railroad, because the New York Central Railroad was like a rolling hotel. People sleep on that train. And these gangsters were doing the dirty work for these wealthy wasps, the Protestants. These Italian gangsters are doing the dirty work for these Protestants. The Astors, the Vanderbilts, this was their town. The Roosevelts. See, they don't tell you this stuff. They just blame everything on Italians and leave it there. But Maranzano, from this building, okay, the birth of the 5 families, Maranzano set up the 5 families in New York City. Yeah, right in the roof, right in the house of Vanderbilt. And the 5 families, now John Gotti, he connects to an ancestry to Maranzano and the 5 families that Maranzano set up. There's a lot of people involved. There's several generations here. I briefly studied a little bit about it. I forget it now, all the names. But obviously Frank Costello was one of them. But Frank got mentioned by Bobby Kennedy in published words. They were Murder Incorporated. See, they were calling out the Kennedys. Well, the Kennedys were calling out them. See, Joe Valachi. See, Bobby was getting Joe Valachi to give the inside information. And Joe Valachi was a driver for who? Murder Incorporated. See, this is why the Rockefellers couldn't sleep nights. Because a lot of these, well, I'll say it, Italians were in the muscle end of the business, working for the WASPs. See, this ties back to a lot of these crimes and this illegal activity ties back to the Rockefellers and their Protestant boardroom pals, which indirectly is the Rockefellers. See, the Rockefellers are criminals. They're a criminal empire. And they can't run their empire without violence and, well, a whole lot of other wrongdoings in violation of the laws of God and man. So when Bobby Kennedy was going to imprison all the criminals, if you go up high enough, the top criminals are the Rockefellers. So without their license to break the law, the Rockefeller empire would collapse. If they can't have a license to murder and kill and steal and rob and sell drugs and everything else they do bad. I'm talking about NFL headquarters here. See, Charles Goodell, you might hear, Goodell, right? Goodell, he's a commissioner, right? His father was a United States Senator. When Bobby Kennedy was assassinated, right, Bobby Kennedy was speeding to the White House. Who ran in 1968 against Bobby Kennedy? Well, if he had lived, he was the leading Republican candidate. There's 3 leading Republican candidates in 68. Rockefeller, Nixon, and Ronald Reagan. Of course, Nixon won the primary. Rockefeller lasted right into like the 2nd or 3rd night of the Republican primary in Miami. Reagan didn't get elected. He didn't get the nomination that year. He got the nomination when 1980 when the Rockefellers decided to dump Carter. when Bobby Kennedy was assassinated, it was Governor Nelson Rockefeller that had to fill his seat. And he appointed Charles Goodell. All right, his son is NFL commissioner. I forget his first name. Charles Goodell. And Charles Goodell recruited a Rockefeller Republican named Hillary Clinton. Yeah, you heard me. And Hillary Clinton started out as a Rockefeller Republican. She went to Wellesley, which received the Rockefeller gift. I'll put that in quotes. And she was scholarship there with the Rockefeller gift and profiled there with the Rockefeller gift. And dispatched to various, deployed by the Rockefellers to the Rose Law Firm. Also, the Children's Defense League was started by the Rockefellers. I told you how they ran the Rose Law Firm. Well, all these prestigious law firms work for the Rockefellers. They work for big corporations. They don't defend the rights of little people like you and I. There it is, NFL headquarters. Charles Goodell. Yeah, I told you that. Charles Goodell. Appointed United States U.S. Senator from New York State by Governor Nelson Rockefeller. That's his son. Makes $45 million a year. And this ties back to the Rockefeller broadcasting industry. Their NBC, CBS, Fox News, the sponsorship, the corporate sponsorship. It's a massive network here. Now, John D. Rockefeller V, married Paul Tagliabue's daughter. Paul Tagliabue was the commissioner before Goodell. Now, I bet you didn't know that. It's all in the family, folks. It's all in the family. And I told you about Peter G. Peterson and the Peterson Commission. The Peterson Commission was started by C. Douglas Dillon and John Rockefeller III. C. Douglas Dillon was a partner in Dillon Reed, which ties to the assassination of James Forrestal. And he was Secretary of Treasury for JFK. And he and Nelson Rockefeller got caught taking money out of the Rockefeller Foundation. And President Kennedy and his brother were prosecuting Nelson Rockefeller for being election violations, at least. Rockefeller's had a lot of reasons to kill the Kennedys, believe me. I could go on forever. But the chief reason, like I told you, was Rockefeller, Henry Ford, and Andrew Carnegie, they were mass murderers. They were killing union leaders, they were assassinating union leaders, and they were using these armed thugs, like Murder Incorporated, to do their dirty work for them. Murder Joe Panto. Albert Anesthesia even admitted it. Well, that came out through the testimony of Joe Valachi because of Bobby Kennedy. See, that's why the Rockefellers couldn't sleep nights. They couldn't sleep nights because don't forget the bloodshed in Colorado. 200 people died in Colorado because of the Rockefellers. Then he had the Ludlow massacre where, women and children were cut down by gangster machine gun fire by the Waldenfeld's detective agency and their armed goons. And the Rockefellers buy the bullets, they buy the guns, they hire the goons to protect their property, and they're innocent. They're innocent. Yeah, that's what they claim. See, so those are open cases that Bobby Kennedy can prosecute, plus the murder of James Reagan. Probably was looking at that. And the murder of Leon Cook, who was the chief suspect in the murder of Leon Cook. And Leon Cook was a union leader. It was who? Jack Ruby. Gangster. That's why Ruby had to take a role in killing Kennedy. Because he had to cover up, he had to keep his own self safe. Because the Rockefellers were out to get, the Kennedys were out to get him. Henry Crown was ordering Jack Ruby around, I believe. Henry Crown was allegedly the kingpin of the Chicago Outfit, which is the Chicago mob. See, there's MetLife, too. There's the MetLife building, As rumor has it, MetLife financed the building in Rockefeller Center. I don't totally believe it. I believe a lot of Rockefeller Center was built by bootleggers, including the Kennedys. But there's a murder there of Leon Black, B-L-I-C-K. I'm losing my voice now. Been out of it for too long. But it was actually Pan Am. Now, Pan Am was originally founded in Rockefeller Center. Jack Whitney was on the board of Pan Am. It was part of Nelson Rockefeller's Pan American, Good Neighbor policy, mumbo jumbo. And there was helicopter crash, if you remember. 7 people were killed. Quite a tragedy. So they got rid of the helicopter port. And MetLife, now Nelson Rockefeller's uncle was on the board of MetLife. Well, he was chairman of Chase Bank before David took over. Well, actually, John McCloy, Warren Commission member John McCloy, was chairman of Chase Bank, and he was on the Warren Commission. After the Chase Bank got called out in the Kennedys in connection with Oswald's best friend, the Bank of America, Chase Bank, and manufacturing were all called out. Uncle Oswald's best friend. Was David Rockefeller ever questioned? Was Nelson Rockefeller's name got mentioned in connection with Oswald's best friend? I think more than once. I know once, maybe even twice. Because I guess found a document recently. I shouldn't say found, it was introduced to me. It had been published for some time. Because Uncle George went down into Mexico. He told the Mexican embassy that he was looking for employment with Nelson Rockefeller. Yeah, and that document got sent to the United States. It was the American Embassy in Mexico City. It was on their letterhead. It said, Uncle George, de Morenchides. Well, it doesn't say Uncle George. That's his nickname, Uncle George. Okay, we got Fleet Week here. We got to honor our people who protect this nation.